Welcome to EJB Talks, Rutgers Blaustein School experts in policy, planning, and health, where we talk with our faculty and staff experts, as well as students, about how the fields of public policy, urban planning, public health, health administration, and public and urban informatics affect your lives. Welcome to EJB Talks. I'm Stuart Shapiro, the Dean of the Blaustein School, and the purpose of this podcast is to highlight the work my colleagues and our alumni in the fields of policy, planning, and health are doing. This marks the start of our 10th season of podcasting. To start the season, we are bringing back an alumni of our urban planning program, Brandon McKoy, who recently won our Alumni Rising Star Award. But it may not be fair to call Brandon Rising anymore with his new position as president of the Fund for New Jersey. Brandon appears to have risen. Brandon is also the first three-time guest of the podcast. Welcome back, Brandon.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Thank you for having me. It's great to see you.
It's good to see you again, too. So the last time we spoke, I think roughly a year and a half ago, maybe, you had recently joined the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities. Before we get on to your new position, can you talk a little bit about some of the work you did there?
Yeah. So when I was at CBPP, obviously it's a tremendous and stalwart organization that does a lot of very important policy work, both at the federal and the state level. Tax and budget policy work, housing, food, immigration, just healthcare, a whole bunch of stuff. And my job was actually in support of the national network of state-based organizations. So in New Jersey Policy Perspective is the member of that national network, but overall it is 42 groups in total, 40 states plus DC and Puerto Rico, total of 450 staff. And I actually wasn't doing a whole lot of policy work in this role. It was more so thinking about how are we ensuring that these are organizations that are healthy and sustainable. Policy work is not something that happens at the snap of a finger or overnight. And so if you're going to be doing this work, you need to be around for the long haul. And how are we building pipelines of leadership? How are we really authentically incorporating principles of equity and inclusion and justice internally and externally with the work that we're doing? And how are we just being better partners? You know, a lot of folks sort of think of policy work in this very sort of top-down ivory tower think tank sort of way. And you know, from when I was at NJPP, I really tried to lead the organization to not be that. And that is the goal for the entire network, too, is how are we showing up and working alongside community, not on behalf of community. And so, it was 2 years and some change at the Center on Budget, really focusing on that for that entire network, and learned a whole lot of stuff. And it was great.
Fantastic. Was it the lack of policy work that brought you back to the fund for New Jersey, or was it something else?
I'm always, trying to get my policy fixed. So I did miss it a little bit, but no, I think it was just actually, I worked at the Fund for New Jersey as my first job out of grad school out of Blaustein.
Right.
I was the first fellow that they had, and Kiki Jameson had just started working there as the president about 3 months before she hired me. And so she announced around, I think, the middle of 2023 that she would be stepping down. And her family moved to Canada for a variety of very important reasons. And so once she announced that, just had some folks ask me questions like, so we know you just went off to do this thing, but would you think about this opportunity? And I think the world of Kiki, of course, I think of the world of the fund itself. And I had a tremendous experience when I worked here previously as a fellow. And so just very excited to be able to be, guiding such an institution that has been at the forefront of a lot of really important policy and advocacy work across the state for so long, and really supported issues that I think people may take for granted, but have been really important and significant to the landscape, the policy landscape and advocacy landscape of the state.
Well, let's hear a little bit more about that. Can you, for our listeners that don't know what the Fund for New Jersey is, can you describe it a little bit? Talk about the kind of work it does.
Yeah, so on paper, it is a philanthropic foundation that provides grants to organizations that are 501c3s, doing nonprofit work across the state. Uh, the organization focuses on organizations that are doing policy work. And so when you look at our list of grantees over the years, you'll find organizations like the ACLU or the NJ Institute for Social Justice, or a variety of environmental organizations or housing-based organizations. And so, the tagline is that we're working to improve the quality of public policy decision making when it comes to the most significant issues that are affecting the people of New Jersey and our region at large. And I like to think that my experience, people know me as a policy person, and I am a policy person, but also just understanding again what it takes to do good work over a long period of time and helping organizations to do that work in a healthy fashion, in a impactful fashion, and and yeah, making sure that they're able to grow and be strong and help folks think about what does the future of New Jersey need to be.
And is that, you talked a little bit earlier about sort of policy with the community versus policy for the community. Is How does that fit in?
So I think obviously encouragement and maybe uh, kind urging when it comes to what it is that we're hoping to see across the state, and just making sure that when we are looking at what are the pressing issues in New Jersey, and what are the things that are getting a lot of attention, and then also things that are not getting so much attention, but are also super important. A lot of these things are about power, ultimately, at the end of the day, and which communities have power, which communities get actual attention, which communities are prioritized and get investments or get invested in, rather broadly speaking, and taking the time to be a voice for and with communities that are often overlooked and historically marginalized, and making sure that anything that folks are working on that is meant to improve the lives of people who are, sort of struggling, that is not done without their inclusion or their say so, right? There's a phrase or a saying, nothing about us without us.
Hmm.
And I do think there's a bit of a wave here of more policy people, leadership, analysts in general taking that seriously and saying, well, you know, we haven't fixed all these problems, so maybe there's something to the idea of, let's be more understanding and aware of what is the appropriate role for us to play and how do we actually get to success.
Great. So, how would you describe your priorities? What's going to be different at Fund for New Jersey? What's going to be the same? There's obviously a lot of good work going on there that you want to continue, but what new are you bringing to the organization?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely am not trying to rock the boat for no reason, and I've actually, I've been saying to folks I've been working for about a month now in the role. I've been saying to folks, because a lot of folks are like, oh, what are you going to change? I've been on the other side of, as a recipient of grants of a program officer or a new president or whatever coming into the foundation, and I don't know if it's like feeling like they need to justify their hire or whatever it may be, but like wanting to just sort of change everything. And even if they were to look at their predecessor and say, hey, this is a lot of good stuff here, sometimes still making decisions to change stuff. And so, like I said, I think the world of Kiki. I think the organization and the foundation has been tremendous. And so there's already a lot of great stuff happening here. And I'm not trying to just change it for change's sake. So I'm still wrapping my arms around things and understanding what the landscape is and what's happening. But one thing that I am particularly interested in seeing, or at least paying greater attention to, is just, in the past 2 years of traveling the country and supporting the groups that were part of the network that I worked with, I would share stories of advocacy and some of the work that I did in New Jersey. And most of the times I'll get blank stares or mouths agape. And just when it came to how does our government work, or how does democracy manifest here, and The only folks that didn't look at me weird were folks in Illinois and Chicago, because they have their own sort of culture, a notorious culture sometimes of how things work. But really, like, when it comes to respect for the role of the public in public policy, and when it comes to, I think, really thinking about what does representation mean and what does democracy mean, at the local level, at the county level, at the state level, and everything in between, and the federal level, of course. New Jersey could be better about some of those things. And so, I had my own experiences when I was president of NJPP and working as an analyst there, when it came specifically to the budget, and the budget getting passed in 10 minutes, and not nobody really having the opportunity to understand what was in it. And this is a document that is spending $50 billion or more, right? And so, those are not healthy public processes. Those are not things that encourage participation or generate much faith in the public when it comes to government. And we should take that seriously and actually change things to ensure that people are that the public is engaged in an authentic way when it needs to be, and that we're working on behalf of the public at all times.
So we're wrestling with these questions of democracy writ large right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, it's in many on many different levels and many different aspects. But let's focus on what you were talking about there, sort of the processes here in the state. Um, what can an organization like Fund for New Jersey do to sort of push for processes, and what would what processes, I mean, you mentioned the budget as one, but what processes are the ones that you think are in the greatest need for changing in order to be a more democratic small d state?
Yeah. Um, I think it's to me, it's not so much about the Fund for New Jersey pushing for stuff, but it's about some of your more stalwart institutions and organizations pushing for things. And so the things that ACLU has been working on, the things that Institute for Social Justice has been working on, New Jersey Policy Perspective, League of Women Voters, like, folks that have been attuned to these challenges and needs for a while. What is it that they want to see? But you see some work around things like the, the electoral processes in New Jersey, and
Mm-hmm.
is it a situation where people feel like anybody can run for office and have an honest shot?
Mm-hmm.
And that has come up in recent weeks and recent months and recent years, because of how New Jersey is very unique in having a ballot line and how that
Right.
manifests and what impact that has on voters, and taking a real look at that and saying, is that helping us have the strongest democracy that we can have? When it comes to just transparency about, what are bills that are being heard in the legislature, and how much time do people have to read those bills, and are amendments being made at the last second, and just things that just, I think a lot of times people have to find transparency by, well, lawmakers will say, well, we had understanding of it. Transparency is not determined by whether lawmakers understood something. Transparency is determined by whether the public understood something. And so, New Jersey is a very interesting place, right? Like North Jersey, there's a lot of orientation to New York, and South Jersey, there's a lot of orientation to Philly. And I think because of that, sometimes there's a lot of things that don't get brought to light or are allowed to sort of happen in quiet ways. But how are we increasing awareness and interest, most especially interest, in
Mm-hmm.
what's happening in our own backyards here and what's happening in our name? Because this is our government and they are making decisions on our behalf, not always in ways that are with our say so.
So let me make sure I understand. You know, I would put sort of three buckets in what you talked about there. Electoral reform, you know, how we do elections, the party line, the ballot line, and such. Legislative reform, how we pass laws and such, and then sort of a broader, maybe more nebulous kind of how do we enhance engagement, and to what extent do the first two help with the third? Are they necessary? Are they sufficient? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think when the first two are weak, it harms the third. Right?
Yes,
When
okay,
when
I agree.
when people don't think that their vote matters, or when people think that their voice doesn't matter, or when people think that decisions are already made before the public has a chance to weigh in, then it can depress, that third bucket. And you hear a lot of folks talk about their concerns when it comes to the health of democracy on like a national scale and on a federal level.
Right.
But like that doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Right.
What happens at the state and local level influences that. And so how do we make sure that we are doing our level best here in New Jersey to strengthen and enhance the health of multiracial democracy so that the things that we see elsewhere improve? Like, let's, unquote, be the change you want to see in the world.
Right.
But it's weird to see, some folks will complain about these things happening elsewhere or at the national level. Well, okay, well, do what you can with what you have right here in front of you.
How do you, and this is one of my bugaboos, how do you overcome the mindset, though, that I see, and maybe it's social media that makes it worse, but, I didn't get what I want, so democracy must not be working. And how do you move from sort of an outcome focused understanding to more of a process focused understanding? Because it may just be that more people want the opposite of what you want.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I do think oftentimes I hear people talk about, well, obviously they didn't, lawmakers or whoever didn't succeed and they must not care. It's like, well, not everybody's in agreement here. There are people who oppose that idea and
Right,
they're working
exactly.
just as hard sometimes to either prevent it from happening or, remove it from the books or whatever it may be. And so I think there's just, I mean, it can sound kind of quaint or, sometimes, but like basic civic understanding and civic engagement about like how do processes work
Yep.
and, how does lawmaking work and how does your local town council work and, what is the counter? When do things happen? What does your mayor actually have the power to do? And what do they not have the power to do? And maybe
Right.
that's a county executive thing, or maybe that's a governor thing. Sometimes I listen to folks calling to ask the governor with Governor Murphy, and like it's great to hear people bring all sorts of issues and challenges to the most, ostensibly the most powerful position in the state. But sometimes it's stuff that is super local. It's like the governor doesn't have any control over,
I know.
that
Yeah.
stuff. We used to have when I was at Plousing, we had home, t-shirts that said "Home rule is the only rule," right? Like there are certain things that only municipal government can do.
Right.
And so just having better understanding of that stuff, I think social media can be a very sort of toxic force and like it can make it just seem like everything's terrible and awful all the time. And I do think sometimes there's like this just being overwhelmed with information. And so to me,
Yeah.
that the salve is, hey, instead of like doom scrolling through Twitter all day, like I'm gonna go to my town council meeting and
Yeah.
like be in community with the people that live around me and what are the challenges that we're all facing together, and let's tackle some of these things.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% there. So we're lucky enough to have you teaching for us as a senior policy fellow. Let's wrap up by sort of bringing this back to the students, to what you say to them in the classroom. What's the message you give around these issues to your students?
Um, I try to encourage them to have a sense of history
Mm-hmm.
and to understand what has happened before them. Like the world existed before
Yeah,
you.
believe it or not.
Right, a novel idea. And sometimes it can feel like people are, as they are learning about these issues, are like, well, obviously this is the answer. Obviously, here's this fix. And why isn't it just fixed already? It's like, well, I'm sure if you look into it, you will find a fascinating story or reason as to why we have not fixed the thing, right? And so, just as somebody who I just turned 37, so I'm sort of, getting middle career now. But, you look at me, I got a young face. I look like I'm 25 or something still. And I used to come up against people looking at me like, who's this young kid coming? What, people used to think I was like an intern for the newspaper when I was at the State House or something like that, right? And so, but I found that the more that I could clearly demonstrate that not only understood, but appreciated the history
Mm-hmm.
of whatever issue I was working on and appreciated the efforts of people who came before me and really actually understood deeply like what worked and what didn't and why were things different now or why were they not different now. uh, I found that I was able to get a lot further by at least clearly communicating that type of stuff. And so the thing that I teach on right now is the racial wealth gap, and it's to sort of help students explore like this is not like some act of nature. Like, this is something that
Right.
exists as a policy choice. And so let's explore the various policy decisions that have occurred over the history of this country and before its founding to get us here. And what are the things that keep it in place, and like understand that this is something that's happening for a reason, not just because it has to be.
It's not an act of nature for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, that's great. I will tell you, eventually the benefits of looking younger start to outweigh the problems. But I hear you.
Yeah.
There was a time when it was a significant challenge. Brandon, thank you so much for coming on. It's great to talk with you again.
Thank you so much.
Big thank you as well to our producer, Tamara Swedberg, and to Karen Olson. We'll see you next week with another talk from another expert from the Blaustein School. Until then, stay safe.